Organized money.
So there is a kind of a farmer revolt or the early stages of a farmer revolt going on in America right
Right.
now. And, we've talked about some of it with regards to Argentina. This is particularly the case in what's called row crops, which are corn, soybean, wheat, things like that, anything you grow in rows. And but it's not just because of Argentina and the possibility of those of Argentine competitors selling soybeans to China versus Americans selling soybeans to China. There's another aspect to it which involves monopoly.
That's right. And so what we're going to look at today, instead of sort of the output side where farmers can sell their crops, we're going to look at the input side, what it costs a farmer to actually grow things. And one of the biggest costs there outside of equipment is seeds. And people don't really think about this. They think, well, doesn't the farmer have the seeds from last year and then they can just plant them again? But that's not really how it works. Seeds are a highly technological product that is sold by a very small cadre of companies. And the farmer has little control over the price. The price is not really connected. The price they pay for seeds is not connected to the price they then go out and sell their crops to on the market. So the prices of seeds can keep going up where the price of corn or soybeans or wheat stays the same. And it becomes a real pressure on the farmer. And a lot of it is due to the fact that we have a really consolidated seed industry.
Yeah, so we have some great guests. One of them his name is John Latham. He runs Latham Seeds, third generation seed guy. And they sell corn, soybeans, alfalfa.
A rare independent seed distributor, manufacturer in this industry, which is dominated, 90% by two companies, Bayer and Corteva.
Right. So he sells in Iowa, Minnesota, North, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Illinois. And then we also have Todd Martin, who is the president of the Independent Professional Seed Association. So he grew up on a farm and he's actually started 4 different companies. And he started his career at Merrill Lynch in commodities markets, but he spent 25 years at Syngenta. He does consulting now. He's like very up on the financial aspect of agriculture. So we're going to delve into seeds and how it affects what you pay at the supermarket. Organized money.
All right, John Latham and Todd Martin, thank you so much for being on Organized Money.
Great to be
Glad
here.
to be here.
Great. So I think when people think about seeds, to the extent that they do at all, they think, all right, you have a seed and you put it in the ground, it grows, and Bob's your uncle. But seeds are a really high tech business. We're talking about patents and intellectual property and genetic modifications and everything. And, in fact, in your testimony, John, you talk about big tech seed companies, which I thought was a nice way of associating that. But before we get to, competition and all that, can we just break down sort of the basics of how you create a seed from the inception to selling it to a farmer? I mean, I know you have to license genetics, but there's also just sort of the seed itself. So, like, what are the components of a seed? How do you prepare that to sale?
You want to take that one, Todd? Or you want?
I was about to say the same thing. You're the expert, John. You actually do it.
You're both experts in our view.
Since I don't know anything, I'll take it. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, John.
How about I start, John, and you just add in where appropriate. When you talk about underlying licensing of genetics, I mean, really and truly, we've got to start there. I mean, you've got to have genetic material that is going to produce the crop that you want it to do and do it in a robust manner. So, you think about corn as for instance, today. I mean, look, corn has come in a tremendous way in just even the last 100 years from a breeding standpoint. Used to, it was open varietal, which is, if you think about open varietal corn, you're thinking about going to Hobby Lobby or some decoration store and getting, the what we consider the colored Mexican corn that really doesn't look like anything like an ear of corn that you'd go in a grocery store and buy today or see in the field.
Mm.
So we start with something like that, and through breeding across generations, we've come up with today's hybrid corn, which is really a major upgrade from what those varietals were years ago. In fact, many of our companies that are out there, many of our independent seed companies that are out there right now, actually had their roots 90 years ago in the hybridization of corn, and that's how they really got started in the corn business. But you get that genetic, and for a corn seed company, you source it through parent seed. You plant that parent seed, literally a male and female, in the field in a configuration. It cross pollinates with each other, and what is produced is hybrid seed that is then basically processed into bags of corn that farmers buy. So I think by and large, that's the large component. We can make it a lot more complex talking about biotechnology and inserting events into the genetics and things of that nature. But by and large, that's what happens. So what, for instance, Latham Seed does is they'll produce corn all one summer, harvest it, that hybrid corn, get it in a bag, treat it, and prepare it, sell it to the farmer in the fall of the year, that the farmer will plant again in the next spring. So it's about an 18-month cycle from beginning to end as you're looking at.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I can just give you my quick perspective. I kind of got into business because I was third generation in our family business, and my grandfather used to do everything with a handshake and over a cup of coffee. And now the business has evolved, so everything is just DocuSigns and legal, and it's just so much more complicated than the business that I thought I was getting into 30 years ago when I first got into this business. It's changed a ton.
And I think maybe the impression that people have that aren't in this business is like, all right, well, how many times do you have to sell a seed? Like, farmer buys a seed and then can just keep planting it if it goes well. But that's not really the case, right? It's sort of on an annual basis. You have to keep buying these seeds.
Right. Yeah. It used to be when I first started in the business in the 90s, you could save your seed, and you still could save a conventional seed. But then when Roundup Ready soybeans came about, that ended. You had to buy new seeds every year. You had to sign an agreement with Monsanto at the time. And so, yeah, it just changed tremendously. So it's, unless you have a conventional seed, I think that'd be the only way you could save it. Otherwise, and even some of them have a genetic patent behind it that you can't save. So it's very, very difficult to save seeds anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So John, correct me if I'm wrong too. But from the hybridization of corn, since corn seed production actually requires a male and female parent in order to produce the hybrid corn, we really don't have an opportunity even there it's kind of a one and done just based on the hybridization, correct?
Right. Yeah. With hybridization, you've got to have on the corn side. Now, soybeans, you could save them and you're not going to lose much yield. But if you tried to save corn without being hybridized, you would lose a lot of yield for sure.
So can you talk about I understand the point that you guys made about, okay, so the physical way that you create seed and then you sell it. But what about the business side? Like, what are the different components? I understand that something like 50 to 70% of the cost of a bag of seed is intellectual property. How does that work? You're not getting 100 cents on the dollar for the seeds you sell. You're in turn paying for some technology components. Like, what are you paying for? Like, what's in the seed from a monetary standpoint?
Yeah, so you're paying for either a trait and genetics in that seed. So a trait could be like either resistant to Roundup Ready, glyphosate, or it could be a resistant to a pest or something, and that'd be the trait component. And then the genetics is the actual part of the soybean or corn product themselves that gives you all the characteristics of that certain variety. So that's what you're paying for. And most of the time for an independent company, you're just mostly sending that to the provider. You don't get to keep any of that. You get the risk, but you don't get any of the reward of that. And you get maybe a little bit of a margin if you're lucky.
So a seed is kind of like, from a financial standpoint, a seed is a bunch of traits, right? So
Hmm.
so it's like corn, right? That's the genetic characters. Okay, so I want corn, and I want corn that can resist this pest, that can do this other thing, that's, has this other trait, and you pay individually for each of those, and then you have the physical seed, the germplasm itself, and those are different things. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
I
Yeah,
think
it
it's
is.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think it's
all
fair. I
right.
mean, normally we'll talk about the underlying germplasm as the genetic um, part, and then trait is kind of what we talk about all in one. And I was just trying to think back and reflecting, and things changed a little bit, but we did some work a couple of years ago, and I think actually John and his brother Chris have updated this. But essentially, we look at intellectual property on traits being solidly 35 to 40% of a bag of corn. Now,
Hmm.
that's the trait component, the biotechnology component, whether that's one trait or multiple traits. And we actually looked at one particular bag, but it evens out pretty much there. The genetic, the underlying germplasm, intellectual property costs is another 15 to 20%. So you can see very quickly you're over 50% of a bag of corn seed is just paid for intellectual property that's been around for quite a while. And then, just to kind of round it out for the full piece, you're looking at production costs that come in. There's seed treatment costs, there's cost of distribution and utilities, freight, and then there's all that cool stuff like sales and marketing and grower programs, because all of those are a component of it. Meaning that of the whole bag of corn seed that you got out there, about this much of it's left for seed company margins. So
Right.
it's a considerable amount, but over half the bag being really about intellectual property.
Right. And I know that these seeds are designed so they can increase yields, and that increases, the potential revenue potential of a grower. But I guess I'm wondering how these seed prices, and we can talk about the trajectory of seed prices over time, but how they affect what we pay as shoppers at the supermarket.
Yeah, that's a good question. It certainly they've over the last 5 years, this price of seed has just gone through the roof, and as there's been less competition, it's just gone crazy. So, the more that it goes up, farmers have to pay more, which ends up hurting them. And certainly, which in a lot of cases, goes to a lot of this goes to grain, which gets fed to livestock and everything. And so it goes through the whole food channel, all these costs, and which ends up raising the price of food as well.
So this is like one of those areas where you wouldn't necessarily see it, but it's, the if the price of a genetic trait or something, or price of genetics or a trait goes up for corn or soy or something like that, then it could make bacon more expensive down the line or something like that. But it sounds like that's what you're saying. But we can't really it's hard to trace that. Um, but one of the things that I think is kind of weird about seeds, and something I didn't know until relatively recently, is that it is structured a lot like pharmaceutical markets, or at least it's supposed to be. So, with pharmaceutical markets, you have these very expensive branded drugs that have a limited time for patents. And then after it goes off patent, theoretically, there are all sorts of games that are played there. You have new companies, you have companies that come in the market that specialize in making a generic version of that branded drug, and the price drops, a lot at first, and then it just totally collapses. Now, I understand there are, or should be, generic, and there's branded seeds, stuff that still the patents are valid, and then there's supposed to be kind of generic stuff in this seed process. Or is that right? Like, is that how it is, or is that how it's supposed to be, how it's structured?
That's how it should be structured, but we just have not seen it at all. We've got really two companies kind of controlling on the corn side of the business, and making it difficult for any post-patent technology to get to market. You've got to have those genetics first of all, and then to be able to get access to the traits, and that's a difficult to do in the current competitive environment that we see right now.
Man,
And
I
just to
think
be
that
specific, who are those two companies? We're talking about Bayer and Corteva, right?
Yeah, let's make friends.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, you're talking about Bayer and Corteva, but I mean, predominantly you're first off talking about Bayer. Um, I mean, look, let's really get down to some cutting areas here. The Matt, you made mention about the patents, and it should be more like or the idea is it'll be more like pharmaceuticals. I would also tell you for people that are farming out there, it should be more like ag chemicals. The reality is, seed is substantially different from both of those and is unique. And that's hard for us to be able to say because everybody wants to say they're unique. But there's one underlying difference with regards to patents in between chemicals or drugs or, you know, inventions that are electronic or mechanical or whatever else. This is a biological system. It is a biological system. And that makes it substantially different. And not only is it a biological system, it is the joining of two biological systems under two separate patent regimes into a single product that a farmer buys.
Mm.
So it inherently is complex. And even when you start talking about patents are off, for instance, John mentioned last week, and it's known in the industry, NK603, which is the Roundup Ready corn technology event. Um, that technology has now been off. This is year two of it being off. You would expect to have a generic product, but it has been intensely managed through intellectual property, through managing that event in only genetics that are also patented. So it has basically barred access to the public for actually getting a version that could be used in other areas. Plus, you have to consider that to get that, you do have to have underlying unpatented genetics or underlying genetics. And those genetics, gosh, in order to produce those and insert that trait into genetics, minimum 4 year time frame, minimum
Mm.
4 years. So, it's not as simple as, hey, I got this plant over here. This product's about to come off patent. I'm going to make this product as soon as it's off patent. And I can turn the spigot on, and 2 months later, I've got a generic. That doesn't happen
Right.
in a biological system.
And
Right.
it's kind of funny that we're talking about, idealizing pharmaceutical markets as if they work really well. Like if only seed markets worked just like our drug system, which
Right.
everybody
Our
loves.
fabulous drug system.
Right. But so just to be, I want to, Roundup Ready, I think most people know what it is, but just to be clear that I just want to make sure I understand it because I think it's a big deal, right? This is this product that revolutionized agriculture. It's a form, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just going to say it. It's a form of pesticide that crops that seeds with certain traits are resistant to, and so it makes growing these crops like much, much, much easier if you use this particular pesticide. Is that right? It's a Monsanto product now owned by Bayer.
I I think that's a good description. John, you want to add any more specificity to that?
No, it basically, yeah, you're right. It's a herbicide that kills everything except the plant, and it used to kill everything, especially, but now it's become resistant. The weeds have become resistant. A lot of different weeds do, so it doesn't have the value that it used to, but it's still used by 90+% of the traded corn in the industry. So there's still value there for sure. But yeah, it kills every weed except it's supposed to, except for the corn plant or the soybean plant that's resistant to the
And
Roundup.
it's an example of what's put into these seeds. What the farmer is buying is this this genetic modification to the seed. And I've heard stuff from farmers about how, oh, the guy down the road from me bought that seed and he uses Roundup and it goes over onto my property. So now I have to buy that seed because I need to be as resistant to whatever pesticide the guy next door to me is using because that moves over onto my farm. So there's a network effect. It's a version of a network effect that's happening there, where if these things get into wide use, then kind of everyone needs the same or similar seed, and the farmer's kind of over a barrel.
So I think there's a little bit more, if you will, there's a little bit more nuance to it than that. And
I'm certain there is.
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate of people understanding the historical reference on this entire technology. And I guess because I lived it from the very beginning in the field, that it gave a very big impression. I mean, there's no doubt biotechnology and what Monsanto did in the biotechnology revolution in the mid 90s was a revolution.
Mm,
It was a game-changing thing. And there are several things that are not talked about any longer about the benefits farmers got. And one of them that was talked about forever was quality of life. Farmers all of a sudden had clean soybean fields.
mm,
Farmers didn't have to worry
hmm
about specific timing to kill weeds. And
hmm
let's face it, weeds, we want to kill weeds in a field, not just because we love to be clean and all how it all looks good, but because those weeds also compete with nutrients that rob yields. So all of a sudden, virtually overnight, the national soybean crop got cleaner and more productive. Farmers got their lives back. They didn't have to worry about timing on spraying. And while we're talking about Roundup, the next side that came into play obviously was insect resistance, the BT franchise in both corn and cotton. And these were times when you had to monitor and spray exactly timely. In some cases during the summer, every 4 to 5 days. If you didn't, you'd take yield robbing pieces. And all of a sudden, with the BT products, holy moly, farmers got to go on vacations with their family because they didn't have to worry about timing. They got a
Mm,
quality of life back. So
wow.
it was really dramatic in those early years. And plus, they were spending a bloody fortune on chemical means to kill these pests. And all of a sudden they had money in their pocket because the BT cost much less.
Right.
Well, now time goes on. We've got a new generation of farmers that only know Roundup and BT. They don't know what it was like before. And the costs have moved from the insecticide regimen, where it was very high, over to the transgenic side. So if you looked at a cost category now of what farmers spend to produce a crop in 1994, pre-biotechnology, and today, you would actually find they're spending more money today, although they're putting out less pesticides. But they are spending a lot on biotechnology. They're spending a
Mm,
lot on seed, and they're targeting different pest spectrums with the pesticides. We actually saw that very clearly in a switch from 1996 to 2006 over that decade. And what's notable about
Hmm.
that is also a time frame when we went from 11 major chemical companies nationally to six.
right.
So
And
huge consolidation in that period of time.
that's the key, right? And so, John, you testified just a little bit ago in the Senate about competition in seeds and fertilizers as well. And you mentioned before that in the last 5 years, seed prices have absolutely skyrocketed. So, how does that affect the farmer? I mean, obviously, it affects the farmers a lot of pressure. But tell us specifically about what it means for a farmer when those input prices really start to go up and up.
Yeah, I think when we definitely have seen major less competition and consolidation, and at the time, commodity prices were strong for farmers. So those companies said, "Well, farmers can afford it, so we're going
Right.
to raise the prices." That was the justification. Unfortunately, now that commodity prices have cratered or gone way down, those prices are still have gone up.
Wait, they didn't drop them?
They didn't drop
They
them.
didn't drop. Weird.
Stunning.
That's just really
Stunning.
strange. Everything else, all the other prices fell. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, right.
Right.
So they did not. So farmers are really in a bind, because the commodity price isn't that much different than it was. Like I think I saw online, it was like 2007, the commodity price was the same. But when
Mm,
you look at input prices, costs for farmers, they were, half or less. So farmers were making good money. And now those input prices, fertilizer, seed, chemicals have just gone through the roof, and it's just made it really difficult for farmers to break even at all with the way the prices have gone up.
I mean, I
I
know
think one of the
agricultural.
things If I can, Matt,
Mhm.
sorry. One of the things that was really interesting 4 or 5 years ago is ag economist named Dan Bassey, who's with the Ag Resource Center in Chicago, started tracking seed prices and underlying commodity prices, and he made the announcement at one of our trade association meetings, the ASTA meeting, that seed prices are completely inelastic to the underlying commodity. And it's seed prices blow up, the underlying commodity price moves up or down. Seed prices do not ever move down.
Hmm.
Substantially, they do not move down.
I think I saw that, and it really stuck with me. As a farmer, I feel very.
Yeah.
Um, no, I remember seeing that. It was really interesting, and I guess you know, we can talk about price, but there is a really interesting story, John, that you told in your testimony that I think is worth going into because it involves something different than price. It's about innovation, quality, and actually national security. So you talked about creating a corn seed that is resistant to a disease called tar spot. And then you talked about the reaction of the big seed companies who are both your suppliers, but also your competitors. So walk us through, the story. What is tar spot? Like, what did you do to address it? And then what was the response from the rest of the industry?
Yeah, well, it was we started a really a small breeding company, uh, part of Latham, and with the idea was to be able to find solutions to diseases like tar spot. And that wasn't what we were originally going for, but that's ends up what that became the disease that we really went
What is tar
after.
spot? What is
Tar
it?
spot, it's a fungus that really can depends on the year, but in certain years it can be devastating to the corn plant. And so, like in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota, especially, which is a huge part of our area, there were certain areas where guys were losing, half their yield or more to tar spot. So it was something that we weren't seeing a lot at the time. A lot of great products that handled it. So we did some breeding and came up with a product that's still in our lineup now that handled tar spot really well. And we thought it was pretty innocent. We weren't, with the money that we were spending, we were not going to be able to take on one of those big tech providing companies. But it was met with anger that we would even consider doing this, and we were wasting our time. We're never going to be able to compete. They were afraid that we were going to latch on to post patent uh, traits and technology, and so that really was a tailspin of a year for us. Then our prices went up significantly, and then we were
You mean what you were buying from them? Like you had to
from
buy things
them,
from them.
exactly from them.
This
So
is, I think, an
they
interesting.
responded by raising. So your competitors who also sold stuff to you responded by raising the price of what they sold to you as retaliation. It sounds like as retaliation or consistent with a pattern of retaliation for you introducing this new product. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I mean, I can't prove
Yeah, obviously
100%
there
there was
is. Yeah.
retaliation, but it sure felt that way to us that fall, because in the marketplace it was very difficult for us to compete in the marketplace for sure.
And I think the key is that the opportunity for retaliation is made there just by the fact that you have a competitor that you also have to buy this technology from. I mean, it sets up the incentives perfectly for them to maintain their dominance in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was nowhere else for us to go, and with this supplier, we were incredibly loyal to them. Over 95% of our sales were there, so you'd think that we would get a little grace, or but there was not. It was we were the prices were raised, and in the marketplace was very difficult that year for sure.
So you were buying traits and genetics from them, and you had been for a long time. Is that, and then you wanted to introduce this particular trait that was slightly different. And is that what was happening?
Yeah, it wasn't an actual biotech trait. It was just a genetic, through breeding, we were able to
Hmm.
create a plant that was handling tar spot extremely well, which was, big problem for our customers.
And you have loyalty rebates too. Those are common across markets, not just in seeds. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're difficult, especially when at the same time your prices are being raised. And then for a lot of independent companies, those rebates are like the whole profit for the year. And so if if they squeeze you that tight, you've got to stay, we got to meet those rebates somehow. It's difficult because some years there's weather, there's, a whole host of things that can happen. But if you don't make that rebate, you don't, you might not make any money that year. So
You mean you have to buy a certain amount and then they'll give you a rebate on it? Is that it, or a
yes,
percentage of
buy
your? Yeah.
or
Okay.
sell, yeah, a
So when
certain
you say make
price.
the rebate, you have to
So
buy.
you have
Okay.
no ability to shop around if they're saying they're hiking the price, you can't go anywhere else. And you said in your testimony that the penalties are so steep that some years we could save money by buying seed and destroying it, which is kind of crazy to think about.
It is. Yeah, unfortunately, it's been the reality. And then it's not something we want to do, but unfortunately with seed, if you can't get it sold, and if the price on that seed, you couldn't sell it last year and then the price goes up again, eventually you're better off destroying the seed than you are selling it because you're going to lose way more money by selling it than you would destroying it. So, it just puts independent company and all that seed is very good seed. It's not like it's bad seed. It could be on the marketplace and for a farmer that's struggling could maybe help them out, but we're not able to do that. And so we have to destroy a lot of really good seed.
It sounds very Soviet, actually. It's very strange. Like it makes more sense to destroy product than to actually use it. So we have pharmaceuticals where, but no generic, genetically modified seeds. And I know patents have long expired. I mean, you talked about the Monsanto revolution, and that was in the 90s. I remember the 90s. I'm now old. And where's the generic stuff? Why is that not here?
Well, I mean, I think that's the question, right? In what we're trying to drive to. I mean, it's the issue again of the biological system and the multiple patents coming in between biotechnology and plant variety protection or the underlying genetics that come together. And, look, I will say, take your hat off to somebody when they're really great. Bayer is really great at intellectual property protection. They have been historically prior to the Monsanto acquisition. So they have been very, very careful to try and protect that everywhere. But the reality is we had the very first generic our post-patent product registered, I think it was last year, and it is a product that Syngenta owns, and it's in corn called BT11. That generic product was registered by Inari, which essentially means they got their own registration for exactly the same event that Syngenta currently sells as BT11.
Mm.
So, that is the first one that's happened. And BT11 has been on the market since 1996. So call it 28 years with a patent life of 20.
Is
Eight
that
more
all?
years past that.
But
Yeah.
you got one now. You got a generic
You
seed.
got one. What are you
it's registered.
complaining about?
It's registered, but there's no product out there that is
right.
for sale
well,
with it in there.
That's a minor detail.
And of course there are a lot of others that have come off patent over the years, but there has never been anyone that has come with a generic entry.
Got it. And Todd, you've done a lot of work on mergers and acquisitions over the years. We've touched on this a little bit, but can you just explain a little bit, maybe broadly, the consolidation that's happened in the seed space?
Oh gosh, there is a chart that does a much better explanation of this than me from a professor at Michigan State who's tracked it from 1996, which is the inflection point to look at from 1996 to 2018, which is the last bout of major consolidation that we've gone through. And I mean, it's stunning. It's a chart that looks at hundreds of companies and the big ones that have gobbled them up, and there are actually three different versions of it that have happened in specific time frames. But I think that what we can say, biotechnology was a revolution. It started the consolidation factor when we went from 11 companies down to 6 within 10 years. And then subsequently, another 10 years on top of that. And all of a sudden, we're going from 6 companies down to basically 3.5 in the crop input space. That was on, major crop inputs, basic manufacturers, the Monsantos, the Bayers, the Dows, DuPonts, Syngentas of that nature, really consolidating down at that level. And of course, large companies like that are going to lead small companies. But what really was disturbing is, and of course, for the Independent Professional Seed Association was founded in 1989. So, right before the biotechnology piece, there were about 300 or so corn and soybean companies out there then. Right now, we're going to count about 120 are still out there. So a solid reduction of over 200 companies that have happened in those intervening years. And, you think about in 1989, DeKalb was not part of Monsanto. That came later, about 1998. Monsanto acquired DeKalb. And as they had this technology, the transgenic technology, they didn't have any place to go with it, really. They were trying to outlicense people. Strikingly enough, I always love this part of the story. For Roundup Ready soybeans, something that was so freaking innovative and so good at the time, Monsanto could not get anybody to buy into it. And they actually did a deal with then Ciba-Geigy, had a very small soybean presence, and Pioneer had a much larger soybean presence, and gave them royalty-free licenses that they could input the Roundup Ready 1 into their soybeans for ridiculous prices. Lifetime royalty-free licenses. So just to tell you, and I can definitely say this now, they did it for Ciba-Geigy for a whopping $250,000. $250,000. They could stick Roundup into their soybeans until that trait was gone and never pay a royalty to Monsanto.
And those companies made
the Pioneer
millions.
price, because they were bigger, was $500,000. Now, what's amazing about that is you think about the millions that are made in transgenics now and how Roundup Ready is still a key factor in 90% of the corn that is sold, in 90% of the cotton that is sold, in 95% of the soybeans that are sold. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars, and they couldn't get any traction. So the next thing they did was they bought seed companies, and a lot of them. They bought DeKalb and Asgrow. And, as things moved forward in corn in particular in 2003, BT corn made a difference. It wasn't huge. There was a competitor out there with NK, Ciba-Geigy, and then Sandoz also had a competitor as Novartis. But as they progressed and they introduced the corn rootworm trait in 2003, it took off. That's really where corn became majorly transgenic. And in 2004, John, you'll have to speak to this specifically, but Monsanto then acquired, I don't know, what was it, 20 independent seed companies or so?
25 or so, yeah.
Yeah, a very large number. They just went out and bought them out. And at that time, it seemed to be a race. Pioneer was trying to buy companies. Dow was buying companies. Syngenta acquired Garston Golden Harvest along with an underlying genetics company. I mean, it was just from 2004 to 2010, it was a free-for-all. If you were a seed company and you even thought about this might be the time to exit, somebody was there with money trying to buy you.
Right.
So it really consolidated down hard then.
That's really interesting. And I remember reading Lena Khan actually wrote about this in a Salon article about Monsanto's acquisition of seed companies and the Obama administration sort of promising to look into it and then never really doing anything about it. But I want to get to the politics of this situation because I think it's really important, John, that you testified a couple weeks ago in the Senate. That's unusual. This is not something that politicians pay attention to. I know there's a lot of anger among quote unquote row crop farmers. So the Capitol Forum reported that the Department of Justice is investigating the U.S. seed sector. I think they were doing that under Biden too, but it seems to be taking a long time. What's the holdup? What's going on here?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I guess John or Todd.
Yeah.
Because Todd, maybe this is more for you, Todd, because you're at a trade association that focuses on this problem. What do you think is taking so long about this sort of investigation into the seed sector?
I mean, Matt, I don't know. It's hard to say. I'll give you an inflection point for me. December 16th. December 16th marks the ninth year since I took a group and went to the Antitrust Division at the Department of Justice and started talking about competition and seed. And December 16th is important because that was under President Obama's administration, the last days. And the first thing they said is, yes, we're looking into all this. We're going to be investigating all of this, but administration change and everything. It might be better to come in April. I was adamant about the fact that no, we want to come first. We want to tell the story. We want you to understand how important this is and how impactful it is because we opposed all of that. Strongly Bear Monsanto thought that that was not going to be the best way forward. Did not like Kim China buying Syngenta. And, Dow DuPont was kind of the third out of those. But we went in there on December 16th, 2016, spent hours in there. We were with 7 or 8 different attorneys in person in their conference room in the Antitrust Division. That was the start of what has been a 9-year journey with us. We have had consistent interactions with the Department of Justice in that intervening time on different levels. We worked diligently. Our lobbyist, Laura Wood, was working very strongly after Trump won and after all these went through. We think we helped get some concessions out of both the Bayer Monsanto piece and Dow DuPont, but it was nowhere near what we wanted to do. And we gave information and gave information. And then we went to, after the administration changed, President Biden was going to come out with his executive order on competition. Our Laura Wood, our lobbyist, went and worked with the administration and got seed included in it. It was absolutely going to be about meat packers and equipment, and we got seed included in that. So we thought we had another life, and we went to work with the USDA and continue to work with the DOJ.
Well, isn't there a case, an FTC case against Corteva and Syngenta on certain seeds?
There is, it was filed, the FTC, which was one of those things that we thought, okay, we've got a lot to talk about here because the FTC is in action and the DOJ was not. And so we started, and I mean, again, we found a friend in Secretary Vilsack and listening to the issues, and I think that they did it. They helped us move the peg some, but at the end of the day, nothing happened.
Todd, you were talking about 2016. We didn't know how good we had it in 2016. I mean, it has gotten significantly worse since 2016, especially over the last 5 years. Once this consolidation has happened down to, two companies owning 90%. You got a couple other companies there, but just massive consolidation since 2016. So, yeah, it's got significantly worse for us and for farmers.
And so, John, and just real quick, John, is that why it was important for you to testify? I mean, like, what was the impetus for you, and what do you think Congress really needs to do in this arena that can maybe help along these cases, or what legislating needs to be done? Like, what were you there to do?
I mean, I think you just got to a point after so many years of seeing just little competition, little choices for us, seeing my friends in the industry going out of business or, being under severe hardship. It's just like, okay, I've been scared to say something. It's time somebody says something. And this opportunity was, at first, the first few days, I'm like, nah, I can't do this. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, I have to do this because somebody's got to say something, because too many people are losing their farms because of what's going on, or being in severe financial difficulty. So, yeah, I mean, I think as far as Congress goes, there's a whole host of things. Just shining a light on what's going on is huge. There's a whole host of things they could do, and certainly to pressure the DOJ to continue to look into this would be great. But to me, just do something. I don't know what the exact answer is, but do something, because what's happening now is not good for anybody.
Well, so I guess I have one question about sort of that FTC case, right? Which is a case that was brought under, I think Phil Sack was involved, but it was brought by the Federal Trade Commission. As you know, Lena Khan was the chair, and I know Alvaro Bedoya has been talking about seeds, and that one is ongoing. And I guess, was that that didn't seem to make a huge splash in the ag world, from what I understand. Is that because the target were sort of niche seeds, or what exactly? Like, why didn't that generate more interest from sort of farmers to say, oh, somebody is noticing this problem?
I think
that case is ongoing.
Yeah, John, if you don't mind, let me pop in here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about the FTC case on both Syngenta and Corteva was they focused on crop protection products, and in particular how they manage post-patent strategies. So, pretty commonplace that, process has been in with both companies for a long period of time. I'm talking like over a decade, that as their active ingredients, their chemicals were coming off patent, they would set up programs with the large distributors,
Right.
Nutrien, Helena, all these guys, to incentivize them not to sell, or to sell limited amounts of generic competitors. And, I've heard them described as 401k programs. You earn this money by selling less and less and less, and then it gets to be a big pile of money for the distributor. So they really have a huge incentive not to break it,
Right.
and to stick with the program. And the FTC went in and challenged, and both Corteva and Syngenta were very active in those areas. Now, I know that Syngenta took a lot of bias on that and said, no, what we're doing is fine. And the cases are still out there and ongoing. But the reality is what the FTC described absolutely was 100% happening. They were market manipulating with the absolute opportunity of trying to stop generics. They were trying to protect intellectual property. I get it, and I understand why, but the FTC took issue with it. So it didn't have anything to do with seeds. And strangely enough, in what we have talked about, and this just how our government runs, what we have found is that the FTC, in the land of jurisdiction on antitrust and anti-competitive activities, the FTC has taken the lead in the ag chemical side of the business, and the DOJ takes the lead in the seeds biotechnology side of the business. Don't know why it's divided that way, but that's
the jurisdictional realities are very strange sometimes. But I want to close maybe by just thinking about this from the perspective of the farmer. I mean, I know farmers have a big bill of particulars right now, whether it's around tariffs or around, whether markets are going to be open for them. But this seems like, a pretty massive side problem if their inputs keep going up and the price that they get to pay doesn't. You've both been in the field. You both are farmers. Where are they on this? Are the farmer trade associations playing a role? Do you think there needs to be more of an alliance, perhaps, between independent seed associations and independent seed distributors and farmers around this issue? Like what can be done about this?
Yeah, I mean, any kind of joint efforts would be helpful. I think, I just see what I see right now going out and seeing our customers, and it's just a difficult time. I think a lot of what I saw this summer, we saw corn in the ground in Iowa that people thought was going to be a bumper crop. And then a lot of areas in nobody's fault, but there was southern rust that came in, and boy,
what is that? Southern rust.
Southern rust. It comes up from the south, and I think it's a fungus, I believe,
okay,
that covers the plant, and so it's supposed to only happen like once every 20 years, and now it's happened the last 2 years. And so so many customers that were like counting on 250 bushel beans or corn, 250 bushel corn, maybe got 200 or a lot less. And you could just see them like, I need this crop to be able to break even. It would just panic in their eyes and just makes you sick, because things are so tight for them. Margins are so tight, and the bills are getting only bigger. And unfortunately what they're getting is less. So yeah, I mean, I've just seen it from going out and seeing our customers, and it's real for them, and it is for me. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of energy behind trying to get something done for their sake. And I mean, no farmer wants just a handout. I mean, obviously we want to be able to pay the bills. They don't want a handout. They want to be able to make money like they should, by having the very best crop, the best quality, best volume of crop that they can. And that's what they're looking for right now.
So I do have to correct you, David. I grew up on a farm, but I'm not a farmer. I've been in ag and worked with farmers, but I don't want to slight and say something I'm not. So I happen to be, as we're recording this, out in Nebraska and been meeting with some farmers out here for a good little bit, and got to tell you, yeah, they're concerned. They're trying to find ways to reduce costs, but to keep their yields up and find a way to manage through all of this. And we do know that there's discussions that the Trump administration is trying to move $3 billion in tariff money out to the farmers. Right. And then, news this morning that the Supreme Court's they're looking at the tariffs in the Supreme Court and receiving that pretty coolly. So who knows what's going to happen there. I will tell you something that I think is very important, and John alluded to this in his comments last week. $1.6 billion annually. That's an important number. $1.6 billion annually is what we say farmers are overpaying on the Roundup Ready trade in corn only.
Mm-hmm. That's just one seed variety. You're just talking about Roundup.
Well, that is in corn, not any other crop.
Just one crop. Yeah.
What they are paying $1.6 billion over what they should be paying
for one trait. That's not. Is that a trait?
That's one trait.
That's not even a seed. It's a trait.
Yeah, right. One trait in corn.
That's an element of the seed. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So if the Trump administration wants to give the farmers $3 billion, $1.6 billion of that, over half of it, they're spending every year on something they should have at a lower price.
You're saying that's a pass through right to the seed company.
Yeah. Well, pass through right to one seed company.
That's right. I guess it's a sort of interesting because if they give them $3 billion and right now it's 1.6, if I'm that one seed company, I'm thinking, why not get all three? Right? Why can't I, that's what the data shows. Anyway, listen, thank you so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed having you here. And I guess I would observe that I think that this is a common problem across every industry. I mean, the specifics of the seed industry are obviously different than, the film industry or whatever, baby formula or whatever, but everybody's having the same issues, which is things are way too costly and the money fundamentally doesn't go to the people who do the work. And I think that's what we're all struggling with. So we really appreciate you guys coming on. And John, you testified in the Senate, and that is a very, very hard thing to do. So we want to both, I thought your testimony was very good, but also just want to sort of laud you for having the courage to say that, because this is a very scary economy in which to actually, talk about these problems when you are subject to coercive power. So thanks for doing that. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
A lot of fun, guys. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Organized money.
I thought the most interesting, a lot of that conversation I found interesting, but I think the thing that's going to stick with me the most is that Trump is trying to get $3 billion to the farmers, but the farmers pay just for that one trait for corn, just one trait in one crop, they pay an extra $1.6 billion. Right. And so that is what you said. It's just a pass through. And I guess that really kind of got to me because it's like, all right, we have this weird Sovietized system where they're destroying seed instead of using it. And then they're Trump is kind of like paying Bayer through farmers. Right.
Yeah.
And that's generating a very strange political brew and a problem for Trump, I think.
Right. Because the other thing that stuck with me there is that I think it was John who said, or maybe it was Todd, that said, seed farmers, they don't want a handout. They just want to be able to farm. And that's what I've always found in talking to farmers as well. So the idea that you're going to buy them off, they know where the money's going to go. They know it's going to be a pass through to Bayer. and they just want to be able to do the job that they have been trained on and that they love to do.
Well, why does nobody want a handout? I want a handout. Handouts are great. You got to do anything.
You're one of the few that
give me a handout.
But, I mean, I think people, I think the work ethic is part sort of ingrained in American culture, and people don't want to have to be in a situation, especially when they don't have to be. Like there is another way here. There is an alternative. And it's about breaking the power of some of these companies. But yeah,
I think what I was joking about that, of course. I think what the problem here is that nobody wants to be in a potentially coercive relationship, like where someone can just arbitrarily coerce you. And that is like the fundamental driver of kind of the rage that's going on throughout our society.
Yeah.
And I think the most interesting part of what happened with the Democrats from 2008 to 2016 was this massive swing against them in rural areas, which I think you can directly trace to Obama saying he was going to do something about these agricultural problems, not just Monsanto, but a bunch of them, and then didn't, and things got really bad there. I mean, you could, Todd talked about 2016 and those mergers, but that merger wave was happening like dead center during the Obama administration.
Right. And it wasn't just about the seed companies, about the meat packers.
Yeah. And it was also about commodities prices and stuff. There was huge farm bankruptcies that were going on in the late Obama administration. But you saw that, and rural America swung really, really far to the right. And it was always a little Republican, but it swung really far to the right. And then it's kind of gotten more and more and more conservative over time, and to the point now where today people think, okay, well, rural America, it's just a bunch of people who are very right-wing. They're Republicans, right? But now you're seeing this interesting kind of moment, and I don't know if it's really going to meaningfully change politics, but you see it in every industry, in every community. But in rural areas, one of the things that's going on is that Trump is really not delivering. This is just not picking on Trump. It's no one's delivered on any of this. But he's just continuing in that tradition of not doing anything about monopolies. And I think what you're seeing with these farmers is they're saying, wait a second, not only are you not affecting our input prices, but you're actually like favoring hedge fund managers on Wall Street that bought Argentine bonds over us. And it's almost a reverse, or it's almost the inverse of what Obama did, where Obama promised stuff to rural America and didn't deliver it. And now Trump is promised stuff to rural America, and it hasn't worked out so far.
And the question is, it's a very volatile time. I think is the best way of putting it. I don't know if it's going to make any kind of meaningful difference politically. I mean, even in a kind of a wave election that we just saw for the Democrats, if you look at Southwest Virginia, which is maybe the most rural area that had a major election, it was still 85% Republican. It was very solid.
Right, and it's not like Gavin Newsom is super interested in the plight of the farmer, right, or in doing anything.
Right, who's going to capitalize on that? That's the other question. But I mean, I think what is interesting is a lot of these issues. So in September, we saw this report from J.D. Schulten, who's a state senator who was briefly running for U.S. Senate in Iowa. And the report goes after, it really set out, here's an actual policy to fix agriculture. And Dan Osborne, who's an independent in Nebraska, has picked up on it. And so there are candidates out there that are looking at these issues. I just don't know that's going to ever transfer into national politics. It's just not. I mean, maybe the fact that there was a seed hearing and what some of the senators said on that, maybe you could sort of glimpse an idea of a politics that actually speaks to the needs of the American farmer. But I'm from Missouri, and you have to show me.
I don't have I'm not going to pretend to be in touch with the farmer and what he or she thinks, but I do think what we have seen is, just as somebody who needs 3 meals a day, it is very frightening to me that we do have a really big, this is something we've talked about. We have a big trade deficit on food now, which we never used to have. So we import about $50 billion more of food than we export. Largely, that's a function of not doing the processing here. But
I was talking to JD, and he represents the second most agricultural district in the country. I think he's talking about his congressional district. And he said there are 2 farm-to-table restaurants in that district. In other words, they're growing everything and none of it is reflected in what they eat. 90%, he said, of food in Iowa is imported. And it's the same for Indiana. And those are crazy sounding kind of statistics.
Iowa has the best soil in the world. I mean, it is like Italy. It is,
and it goes into our
paradise.
Cars, and it goes into our cows. That's where it goes. That's the product of that soil. That's where it's going.
I guess here's my view of the politics of farming, and it's completely made up. But I have a basic idealized sense of, I think that you have to respect work. And I think there's this view that that people don't, politicians don't respect work. And farming is work. Farming is hard. And you have and owning a farm and running a farm is work. Working on a farm is also work.
It's manual work, but it's also real intellectual work, because you have to be a small business and you have to understand, and make that all balanced. But I think what you're getting at is exactly right. And you said it in the interview. It's like the people getting the benefit are not the ones doing the work.
Yeah. And I think that's, broadly speaking, whoever realigns America, right? And I think we've seen change elections since 2006. All the way to today, except for 2012. But every other midterm and presidential has been a change election.
That's right.
I put it, throw the bums out wave, or the throw the bums out trend is now old enough to vote.
And it looks like it's going to trend in the exact same fashion next year, based on the results of the off-year midterms here.
100%. And I think when this ends, whoever is going to realign the country and to sort of stop this kind of throw the bums out mentality, the one bum people they're going to stick with, it's going to be the person who values work, and everybody can kind of see that. And they're not going to, they may not get all of rural America. If they're a Democrat, they're not going to get a majority of rural America, but they'll get 40% or something like that. And same on if it's a Republican,
right?
They're not going to take all of urban America or majority, but they'll take 40%. They'll take enough, right? But there's this sense that they don't respect work. They respect the hedge fund guys, or they respect the bureaucrats, or whoever. They respect them, not people that work for a living.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. Well, it was a great episode, and we're going to have another one for you next week. Keep listening. It's Organized Money.
Organized money.